Red Dead Redemption 2 is one of the greatest games of all time, and while it's not a role-playing game, the choices you make as Arthur Morgan have large effects on how the game plays out. Despite this, Arthur Morgan is an established character in his own right, and likely wouldn't make every single choice the player does, so in this video I'm going to be tackling exactly what choice Arthur Morgan would make in every situation in Red Dead Redemption 2. 95% of my viewers are unsubscribed, so if you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe. The first major decision in the game is thrown at the player in the very first mission. After incapacitating the O'Driscoll, Arthur asks Dutch if he should spare or unalive him. Dutch says the choice is up to Arthur. I think Arthur would unalive the O'Driscoll here because the O'Driscolls are basically the Vanderlyn gang's mortal enemies, and if he does spare him, it could be worse for Arthur and the gang. The O'Driscoll could go back to Colm and warn him that the Vanderlyn gang or another gang is in the area, which would likely lead to the fact that they're actually ready for the ambush on them and that the Vanderlyn gang members could actually die in that ensuing battle. Also, the O'Driscoll could literally just die in the snow, and I think Arthur could see, just unaliving and shooting the O'Driscoll in the head right there as a mercy killing instead of actually just letting him die in the snow, which could be really painful and, is probably one of the worst ways to die. So I think it's just better in general if Arthur just puts a bullet in this guy's head and ends his life right there, because I just think in basically every case, it makes more sense for the gang and just makes more sense for Arthur as a character, because at this point, he's a pretty ruthless guy and the O'Driscolls are basically the Vanderlyn gang's mortal enemies. So in this case, I think Arthur would definitely just unalive him right here. The second choice is presented in the mission Who the Hell is Leviticus Cornwall, where Arthur can either silence the train employees forever or just let them live. I think in this situation, it's a pretty easy one. Arthur would just let the train guards live in this situation. They really haven't done anything wrong besides working for Cornwall, and they said they're not going to do anything or rat on them, and it's kind of hard to you might see the face here, but they're all wearing masks and whatnot, so it's not like they can be like, oh my god, this is a guy with a beard and all this. Like, you can kind of know who the people are, but you can't really rat on them and fully have a description of them. And Cornwall does eventually figure out who Arthur and Dutch are and who actually robbed him here, so I don't really think it makes sense for Arthur to just silence the guards right here, because they're not really the ones who are doing anything wrong in the situation, and they're kind of just innocent bystanders, so there's really no reason to put a bullet in any of their brains. The first decision that Rockstar makes very clear in the game is the Jimmy Brooks choice in Polite Society, Valentine style, where Arthur can either save or unalive Jimmy Brooks, the man from Blackwater who recognizes him as an outlaw and kind of calls him out on it. I think in this case, Arthur would definitely save Jimmy Brooks in this situation. Brooks is clearly spooked by Arthur, and it doesn't seem like he wants any trouble. I mean, he says it a bunch of times, I don't want any trouble with you, I'm gonna forget you out of my mind, and it just doesn't seem like he's a guy that's very threatening. Potentially he could rat on them, but even if he does rat on them, it's just hearsay. And if you see someone on a bounty poster that says their bounty is worth $1,000 and there's a finder's fee for it, maybe you could just be lying about this stuff. And when a murder happens and they put a bounty poster out in real life, a lot of times people will just lie about seeing the person, or make it up in their head that they saw the person. So I think in this case, because Jimmy Brooks seems like a nice enough guy, it doesn't seem like he's going to do anything, especially when Arthur does eventually save him. He does seem very thankful for it. I think Arthur would save him here. I think it's really just a mean way to kill someone this way, where you step on his fingers, pushing him off the mountain in that way. And I don't think Arthur would do that in this case, and I just think it makes more sense that Arthur saves him. And this is an actual really interesting mission because it can actually affect the Strange Man's cabin in Lemoyne, where there's one poem if you save him and one different poem if you kill him. But this is the decision where Rockstar really introduces honor to the player, and I think in this case, Arthur would definitely pick up Jimmy Brooks, getting that positive honor, and just I think a positive honor Arthur is the more canonical approach to how Rockstar wants the game to play out. The next minor decision is in the mission A Quiet Time, where Arthur and Lenny go to the bar after Lenny goes to the bar with Micah, and then Micah gets captured there, basically after causing a bunch of a ruckus. But during this mission, a man named Jeb tries to heckle them as he is extremely drunk himself, and Arthur either has the choice to threaten him or to charm him. And I think with this event, Arthur would definitely charm Jeb when he's annoying Arthur and Lenny. When Arthur's drunk, he doesn't seem to be like a harmful person, like someone like Micah is, and often just tries to have fun with the people around him. I could see Arthur threatening Jeb if he was a little bit more aggressive, but he just seems like a drunk person that just doesn't really understand what he's doing, and Arthur definitely has enough charisma to take care of the situation without a threat, and especially because Lenny is a character who's kind of freaked out after Micah got captured and after what happened with Micah. I think Arthur would kind of try and keep the tension down a lot and try and, make Lenny as calm as he should be. So, I definitely think he'd charm him here. And then later in the mission, there's another, choice where you can either drown or not drown Jeb. And I think, again, in this situation, Arthur would not drown Jeb in the water trough, because if he does, Arthur would kind of be like Micah was in that first mission where, Micah was causing a bunch of ruckus, and like if Arthur kills someone here, it'd kind of be the same thing, and then the situation would be very similar to what happened between these two. I don't think Arthur's that cold of a person, and he'd probably try and, get Lenny or like make Lenny as calm as possible. And I think the way to do that is to not drown Jeb and not cause all this ruckus. And, if he does actually do that, Lenny comes back here like, oh my God, you're just like Micah. And I don't think Arthur would want to do that. So I think he just wants to give him a little bit of a wake-up call, and just putting his head in a couple times, but not fully drowning him, just gives Jeb a clear wake-up call. Arthur's next choice is in the mission with Hosea, Spines of America, where they rob Seamus's cousin's stagecoach. Hosea asks Arthur if he would rather rob the cousin's house at night or during the day, and I think in this situation, Arthur would rob Seamus's cousin in the day because he trusts Hosea enough to pull off a simple con like this. He doesn't just want to leave him in the side in the barn while Arthur does all the work, and Seamus wants the cousins to know they've been robbed by him, not dead, which is a potential consequence of the nighttime approach, because if you're in someone's house, especially these guys, where, in the 1880s, they always have guns by their bedside, and Arthur's coming around and he's like creaking around a little bit, and if someone wakes up, they're gonna get the gun out and pull a cap and shoot Arthur immediately if they do see him and if they do get the jump on him. I think just going at nighttime is definitely the way more risky of the opportunity, and he definitely wants Hosea to a little shine here and kind of get back his skills. So I think going during the day makes way more sense, and I just think Arthur would want to avoid like potentially a close confrontation where he could get shot a little bit and potentially just get injured or even killed in this situation. And I think, again, you're not going to want to kill the people there either, so I think going a day makes the most sense for all the parties and just leads to the least conflict. So I definitely think Arthur would choose day here. During chapter 2, Arthur gets a letter from his ex-girlfriend, Mary Linton, asking for his help. After going to her temporary home in Valentine, she asks Arthur for his help getting her brother out of the Chelonian cult. I think in this case, he would definitely accept what Mary wants, because he knows that Mary is going to kind of use his affection for her in a way to like better herself. But at the same time, he's such a sucker that he cannot and will not resist it. And he does love Mary, and I think she loves him back. So, that works. But he also has a soft spot for Jamie, and I believe that he would want to help him in any way he can. It says that he and Jamie are really close, and he saw Jamie as a little brother while he was dating Mary. So I think there's basically no reason why Arthur wouldn't at least help Jamie in this situation, even if he doesn't want to help Mary. And the fact that Arthur has basically done things for people that offer less of a reward than one of his friends being saved from a potentially harmful cult like the Chelonians, who Arthur at least vaguely knows about, means that I think he definitely would do this. And just the fact that, he looks at Jamie as a little brother, similar to how he does John, means that he definitely would save Jamie in this situation. And then later in the mission, there is a choice to talking to the Chelonian Master if you want to do it in an aggressive way and basically just fighting your way to get Jamie back, or if you want to do it in a more positive way and talk your way into getting Jamie back. And the Chelonian Master asks Arthur what he's searching for in life, and Arthur says he's searching for a purpose in life, which I feel like really encapsulates the journey of Red Dead Redemption 2, where Arthur is always kind of searching for his purpose in life, and I feel like it really works in this situation, even though basically the same thing happens no matter what. If you are nice to Jamie, or if you're not nice to Jamie because he runs away, I think this is the better way of doing it, and I think it's the way that Arthur would do it, because at this point in life, he's pretty confused, and while he's still like really, really buddy with Dutch, and he hasn't really turned against Dutch in his own mind, I think this is the way he'd go, because he's always looking for purpose in Red Dead Redemption 2. At the end of the mission, A New South, Arthur has the ability to go fishing with Jose and Dutch after their initial plans of going fishing gets derailed after seeing Trelawney and saving Trelawney from the Rhodes Sheriff. This is probably the easiest decision in the entire game. These are Arthur's two mentors. He hasn't really gotten any time to hang out with them, enjoy their company without some kind of plan going down. This would be a great time for Arthur to relax, and who better to do it with the two people that are his father figures, and just so they can, reminisce and have that nostalgia of all the old times, the old and good times where they didn't have to, think about providing for an entire gang and trying to get away from the criminal lifestyle, which is what's kind of happening in Red Dead Redemption 2. So I think Arthur would definitely choose to go fishing with Jose and Dutch, because why wouldn't you do it? It's just a nice and fun and relaxing thing. And even if you had a tough day before, this would be a nice thing to relax from that. The American Distillation mission, where Dutch, Bill, and Arthur go and blow up the Lemoyne Raiders distillation thing and take their moonshine, ends with Dutch proposing a nice and friendly race with Arthur back to the camp. And similar to the last mission, I don't really see any reason why Arthur would decline this race with Dutch here, because it's kind of the same thing as the last one. It's kind of just a nice way to reminisce on the old times where they didn't really have to think about this whole gang. And, it's nice to have Dutch gain back into that younger spirit and not being this just old guy who's always the leader of the gang. They can just have this nice friendly race where they're friends and they're equals, instead of one being the big leader of the group and the other one being his disciple or a member of the group. They're both on kind of equal terms if they're racing against each other. So I think Arthur would for sure accept this race. It's just a nice thing to do with Dutch, and it really brings them back to the old times. In preaching forgiveness as he went, the mission where Arthur and Lenny go to scout out Shady Bell, Arthur has the option to either send Lenny in pretending to be a friendly black man to a extremely racist group of Lemoyne Raiders, or just shooting the dynamite in the camp, starting the fight that way. And I feel like this decision is also really, really easy. Arthur likely wouldn't want to put Lenny into major danger as he would be in this situation. This literally would be one of the riskiest options, because Lenny could very easily die if one of the Lemoyne Raiders just pulled a gun on him and quickly shot him, or after the KR starts, one of the other members could have a pretty good shot on Lenny since he's so much closer to them. I also just think using the dynamite is a much better surprise. Even though Lenny is a solid surprise there, the people are at least on guard when a black man comes into their extremely racist group of people. They're probably going to be having their hands at the gun ready, while if Arthur just shoots the dynamite from super far away, it's just going to start the mission off that way, and it's likely going to catch the Lemoyne Raiders a little bit more on surprise than, Lenny being right up in their faces would. In the mission Sodom Back to Gomorrah, Arthur has the chance to either send Karen in as a lost girl or a drunk Harlow to distract the customers of the bank. And I think in this situation, it's pretty easy, because I don't really think either of these make that big of a difference, but the drunk Harlow is a bit louder, and I think in real life, the lost girl would make a lot more sense to trick the customers. So I think Arthur would pick that one. You can definitely easily trick the customers and the bank man with the lost girl routine. Well, I think the drunk Harlow would likely put the customers more on edge, similar to the last one, where it's one of them is going to be a little bit more loud and racy, and the other one just going to kind of catch them off guard, where, people want to help this lost girl, versus the drunk Harlow. It seemed like they're kind of a little bit more mad at Karen when she went in with the drunk Harlow versus the lost girl routine. So I think the lost girl routine does make a little bit more sense here, even though it seems like Arthur does, at least like using the drunk Harlow routine. At Shady Bell, Arthur receives a second letter from Mary Linton asking him to meet her in Saint Denis. She asks him for help with her father, who's still a drunk gambler, and Arthur says that he's worse than he was when they were together, and Arthur clearly hates, Mary's father. And while Arthur does clearly despise Mary's father, I think he would help her in this situation, as I think this would be a very good distraction from a lot of the stress that was happening in the whole Vanderlyn gang during chapter 4, where Kieran dies, Sean had just died, and there's just a lot more tension building up in the gang here, where, they want to get to Tahiti badly, they want to get out of the outlaw lifestyle very badly, and just kind of not working as well as they thought it would, and especially after Jack gets captured and all that, there's a lot of stress going on in the gang, and I think, hanging out with Mary Linton, a woman that he loves, would make a lot more sense for Arthur. And even if he's doing something that he doesn't really like with her, he at least gets to spend time with the woman he loves. So I think he would definitely help her out in this situation, because he is still a sucker for her no matter what he tries to put on, and no matter if he knows he's being manipulated basically every time he's hanging out with her, and he knows that their life would never work out. During their time in Shady Bell, Tilly is kidnapped by the Foreman brothers, specifically by Anthony Foreman, who was seen harassing her in polite society Valentine style. After Arthur takes care of these Foreman brothers, Anthony Foreman runs off and Arthur hogties him and brings him back to Tilly, where he asks her what he should do with Anthony. Tilly tells him to let Foreman go so he can tell the rest of his family to leave her alone, while Grimshaw tells Arthur to just slit his throat there because she doesn't believe Anthony after he says, "I'm not going to do anything to Tilly ever again." They say it's up to Arthur to decide, and I think Arthur would let him go because it's what Tilly wants. Miss Grimshaw does have a strong argument saying that Foreman would likely come back if Arthur lets him go, but he did just slaughter basically Foreman's entire gang, or at least most of his gang, and Tilly makes more sense with saying that if Foreman tells the rest of his friends, they'll kind of leave him alone, and the fact that, he did slaughter the rest of his gang means that they do have some powerful people on the other side, and Foreman just like, oh, I can't deal with these guys. They're going to kill us if we go after Tilly again, so we might as well not. And I think Tilly knows Foreman a lot better. I mean, she's been holed up with this guy since she was 12, and he's been harassing her this whole time. So she's saying that he would not come back after her probably makes more sense than Grimshaw, because Grimshaw just met this guy, and while he does seem like a not great guy, it makes more sense to trust Tilly because she knows him a lot better than anyone else does. In A Rage Unleashed, after Arthur, Charles, Dutch, and Eaglefly steal back the horses taken from the Wapiti reservation, Dutch goes to plan an attack on the army with Eagleflies. So Charles asks Arthur for help with Rain's Fall, and I think, of course, Arthur is going to help Rain's Fall at this moment. Charles is one of Arthur's best friends and is trying to get him to help someone that he is also really good friends with and wants to help and support. And Dutch is clearly being dismissive of Arthur in this moment where he's like, oh, Arthur's too sick. Arthur can't do anything with Eagleflies because he's a little sick little boy. And it's just like he's kind of pushing Arthur away, and, it's kind of becoming Dutch and Micah show instead of the Dutch, Arthur, and Hosea show. So I think Arthur's a lot likely to do stuff outside of Dutch's control, and I think this is a good way to kind of get away from it just being, oh, I'm doing Dutch's stuff, and oh, now I'm going to be doing Arthur's stuff. I'm going to take my destiny into my own hands instead of it being in Dutch's hands all the time. And I think it's also a good way of trying to convince Eagleflies to stop attacking the army, because his dad is probably the best person who knows him, and talking to his dad and getting to know Eagleflies is probably a good way of stopping this attack on the army that Arthur clearly doesn't want to happen because he thinks it's a really, really bad idea, and he's trying to convince Dutch not to do it either. But Dutch is clearly, so far in his head that he thinks it's the best idea to attack the army instead of to just let the army stop fighting them and trying to convince them in a more diplomatic way. In Money Lending and Other Sins 6, Arthur has to collect debts from both J. John Weathers, a member of the U.S. Army who abandoned the army to provide for his Native American pregnant wife, and Mrs. Londonderry, the wife of a deceased Annesburg coal mining worker. During the J. John Weathers mission, his wagon with supplies burns down while he and Arthur fight off the U.S. Army who are trying to arrest him for, leaving the army, but Weathers still tries to pay off the debt with a silver locket that he has, and Arthur can either absolve the debt or take his silver locket. I think Arthur would easily absolve the debt after seeing the condition that Weathers is in with his new family. He thinks, oh, this guy needs the money more than I do. I mean, the gang doesn't really need the money here, and this guy's whole supply wagon just burned down right in front of Arthur, and he seems pretty sad about that, so I think he would just let him take the locket and just absolve the debt because he wants to, at least give these guys a reasonably solid life. And especially when there is a baby on the way, I think Arthur would do the right thing here and absolve the debt. After going to the mine and realizing that Arthur Londonderry actually is dead, Arthur heads to Mrs. Londonderry's home and tells her he's going to absolve the debt for her. He then has the choice to either just absolve the debt fully or give them some extra money. And I think Arthur for sure would give them some extra money here because it's very similar to the Downs' family situation where the debt that Strauss, laid on the family basically killed the father here because he was overworked and he always had to pay for the money. And, Thomas Downs got tuberculosis. This guy, I don't know exactly how he died, but I think he overworked himself in the mine and maybe got lung cancer that way. And I think it's pretty similar to that where he helps the Downs family there. He tries to get them out of the life, and he's actually really sorry about, the fact that he killed Thomas Downs. I think it's pretty similar here, where he just wants to get Strauss out of his life, and he wants to get all these debt people out of his life. He doesn't want to have any regrets here, so he's going to give them the extra money and absolve the debt and just fully give them some extra money to live a new life and just get out of Roanoke Ridge and Annesburg, because that's a pretty sad place. You don't want to be in an area where your husband had died in the coal mine thing. So Arthur giving them some extra money is probably the thing he would do here. He just wants them to start a better life. In Archaeology for Beginners, Captain Monroe asks Arthur to help him with something, and Arthur can either accept or decline. Since Arthur is already helping Rains Falls and just the whole Wapiti Reservation, I think he would accept this mission from Captain Monroe, because Captain Monroe is working really hand in hand with Rains Falls at this point, trying to get the army to basically stop fucking over the Wapiti Reservation and to stop doing all these extremely bad things to the reservation. And Monroe seems very much like a good man, and I think he and Arthur seem to have similar points of view at this point in their lives, and I don't really see any reason why Arthur wouldn't take this mission. And then Monroe's actual mission is for Arthur to just steal some smallpox vaccinations that the army was first going to give to the Wapiti Reservation, but then they moved it away after some of the initial tussles they had when Eagles Flies and Dutch stole the horses back. So they moved the smallpox vaccination. They're going to give them to other people. So Arthur steals them for Captain Monroe, because Captain Monroe can't do it because he is a member of the army himself. But I think this makes the most sense, because there's no reason why Arthur wouldn't help Captain Monroe. They seem fairly similar in terms of worldviews, and Monroe is just a great guy, so I think Arthur definitely would help him in this situation. Miss Sadie Adler Widow is a mission where Sadie asks Arthur for help eliminating the O'Driscoll boys at the Hanging Dog Ranch for her to finally get her revenge on them for unaliving her husband. This to me is one of the trickiest decisions in the actual game. I think Rockstar didn't handle this one quite that well, because you do actually get honor for helping Sadie here, and you don't get honor for not helping her here. But I think this is one that could really go either way for Arthur, with Arthur thinking that Sadie kind of taking revenge on the O'Driscoll boys even more than before. She clearly wanted to kill Colm, and she made sure it happened, and she kind of already has had a little bit of revenge in that way, but she doesn't need to go out there and just eliminate the O'Driscolls from history. There's no reason to kill the rest of them, because the rest of them are kind of innocent in some sense. There's that one guy, who she does kill in this mission. But I think Arthur would try and stop her from, going and killing the O'Driscoll boys, saying that revenge is a bad thing to do. But when he does realize that Sadie's going to go with or without him, I think he would join her on the mission, because he doesn't want another person in this sense that is one of the people he actually cares about dying. And I think her solo going against 20 to 25 O'Driscolls probably isn't the greatest idea. So I think he would join her in this situation, but I think he'd try his best to stop her throughout the entire mission. He'd be like, Sadie, this is a bad idea. Sadie, this is a bad idea. And then when he realizes she's fully going for it, I think he's just going to help her out there, because he doesn't want another person that he loves dying there. But I think Rockstar really handled this decision very badly, because there's no reason to get honor to just murder all these O'Driscolls, and there's no reason to get dishonor or low honor for not helping her out here, because it's probably the better thing to do in this situation is to not help her out here, because you're just killing more countless people just for Sadie's whims. But I think the fact that Sadie does eventually just come out perfectly fine if you don't help her at all is also kind of weird, because she just goes 1v25 and you're telling me she kills every single one of them, even though they're kind of seasoned veterans in terms of fighting. That's a little weird, and I just don't think it's the greatest way to do it. At least giving Sadie an injury would be kind of interesting in its own right, because it's okay, you didn't help Sadie and this is what happened because you didn't help her. But the fact that she comes out without a single scratch on her is just kind of a weird decision from Rockstar. I think it's one of the worst decisions from Rockstar in the entire game, but I think Arthur would go with her and, do exactly what Rockstar wants you to do in this mission. In the final mission, Red Dead Redemption, we have the most important mission in the entire game, if Arthur should help John or go back for the money. And I can see a really good argument for Arthur going back for the money, trying to set John and his family up for a better life with the Blackwater money, because, even when John eventually does recover it, it's so much money that he can, pay off the house debt and get a ton of things for the family. But I feel like it's pretty clear that he would instead help John here. There's no reason for Arthur to leave John here when this could be his last moment with John in his life, and the fact that he's going back for the money instead of making sure that John is in a good place. I mean, throughout chapter 6, the whole time he's like, John, you got to get out of the gang. John, you got to get out of the gang. You have a family here. John, you actually have something to live for. I don't have anything to live for. It's like every single time during chapter 6, it makes sense for Arthur to be thinking that he wants John to get out safely. And I think going back for the money doesn't really make sense in that situation because John really isn't safe at this point. I mean, clearly he does get out safely, even if you do go back for the money. So it doesn't really change anything, but I think Arthur would want to spend his last moments trying to save the people he loves. So again, like the same thing with Sadie, even though he doesn't really want to go back for them and potentially going back for the money is a better decision, he'd want to spend these last moments with a guy he loves and like someone he sees as a brother. So I think he definitely would help John and try and help John get away because yeah, that's the whole point of chapter 6. He wants to help the people he loves get away from the Vanderlyn gang. And you know, that's exactly what he does if he does help John here. So I think there's basically no way that Arthur would go back for the money because he also knows he's going to die at this point. And he knows that, yeah, it's probably going to be the last time he sees John, no matter what, if he lets John go out alone. So just spending as much time as possible with John here would be the best decision for Arthur. I think the decision that Arthur would definitely make in this case. Thank you for watching to the end of this video. There's an amazing video popping up right now, so click on it because YouTube wanted you to watch it.